Now we're recording to the cloud, wherever the hell that is. I have a feeling it's not the one above my head. All right, so we got some good things to talk about tonight. First, I'm going to grab a dog. Because otherwise, he'll growl the entire time. I'm a slave to a 30-pound terrier. Not terrorist for all the FBI agents that are going to be watching this later. Terrier. That's right. I am a terrierist. I admitted it on recorded video. I admitted I'm a terrierist. Okay, so what we're going to talk about tonight is we're going to get to the root of some things. All right, because a lot of times folks come and they ask questions. And first off, I'm not big into making disclaimers because, quite frankly, I don't give a crap about what folks accuse me of doing or not doing. You can call it practicing law. You can call it practicing medicine. If I give somebody a cough drop, am I practicing medicine? If somebody comes to me and says, hey, what do I do if the cops or CPS knock the door? And I give them my knowledge and wisdom. Am I practicing law? I don't think so. I think I'm giving advice, but more than that, I think since everything with me starts with scripture, starts with God, because you can't have an absolute without an absolute being, then I would advise that I am providing advice that is based in scripture and thus is scriptural advice. We are told in scripture, my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. Because you have rejected knowledge, I will also reject you from being priest for me. Because you've forgotten the law of your God, I will also forget your children. I don't care about man's law. That doesn't mean I don't respect man's law. That doesn't mean that I don't have to deal with man's law while I exist in this fallen world. Okay. It's just I have a lawgiver that is above me, and I am providing knowledge based upon that lawgiver's dictums to me, his guidance to me. That's what I'm doing. And if anyone has a problem with that, they're more than welcome to try to take me into court for that particular accusation, and we'll see how that shakes out. So, folks come and they ask questions, and I never intended to be the guy at the top of some pyramid hierarchy who knew everything, because frankly, I don't. If anything, I would say I've made enough mistakes that I can tell people what I do, and I can tell people where I've screwed up. And those things are invaluable. A long time ago, when I first started studying all this stuff in the world, someone said to me, don't listen to so-and-so. He's been to jail. Don't listen to that person. He got arrested a few years back. Okay. I appreciate the information, but you're not really telling me anything about that person. You're telling me something about you if you tell me about that person. But here's the deal. Unless somebody has been in the system, I don't know that I really care to take advice from them about the system. You can't really trust the words of someone who's telling you about court if they've not ever been in a court. Now, I'm not saying that we can go out there, somebody like me, I can't go out there and engage in every possible thing in order to give people perfect advice. I can't start a business in Alaska, get a divorce in California, get arrested in Maine, and know how to handle all those things. So when people come to me about those things, yes, I can apply what I know, but quite frankly, what I really need to do, and what I'm finding I'm being guided to do, is take those folks back to the very, very basics. Because if folks understand the very basics, then they can generally solve their own problems. And that's what we're going for. Yes, we're putting together a lot of knowledge about paperwork and processes and all that good stuff, and about names and how to do business in this world where everything is commerce and everything is a business. But the average person, and I often start, if I give any type of public speaking on this stuff, and it's a newbie class, what I usually start with is that the average person does not know who they are. They don't know what their name is. They don't know where they live, and they don't know what their nation is. Okay. Nation as opposed to country. A nation usually has jurisdictions and laws and all that good jazz, right? So if you ask the average person who they are, they don't know. Oh, they might give you a name, but do they know what that name is? And so we're going to break it down real quick to what the very basics are. All right. So one of the things that I do when I'm talking to folks in person is I'll ask them, what happens if we take someone and I say, okay, who are you? And somebody says, well, my name's Beth. And I say, okay, Beth, if we cut your hand off, Beth, are you still Beth? And usually the answer is, yeah, I'm still Beth. I'm not any less of who I was before. I just don't have a hand. Well, what if we cut an entire arm off? Then we get more morbid. We cut off a leg, 2 legs. How far do we go before Beth is no longer Beth? As long as Beth still has the ability to breathe and have a physical body here in this realm, Beth is pretty much still Beth, which makes that is a huge indicator of who Beth is and who we are, because there is a part of us that exists independent from where we're at right now. There's a part of us that exists independent from our body. And in order to talk about that, there's no way that you can talk about that unless you start venturing into the realm of absolute truth. And you can't venture into the realm of absolute truth unless you venture into the realm of an infinite creator. It's just not possible. And folks, I've had folks say, well, Bill, I'm not a Christian, blah, blah, blah. Well, I don't care if you're a Christian or not. I'm not even here to speak to Christians. I mean, if you're a Christian, you may understand some of this, you may not. I don't know. I attended a conservative Baptist church for 2 years before the pandemic stuff, and I didn't find myself in good company. I mean, they're all right folks. I'm not saying anything bad against them. It's just, I didn't fit in real well. I think that and I'm not comparing myself to Jesus by any means, but I prefer the company of thieves, prostitutes, and criminals to the average churchian world, because the average churchian world, they seem to surround themselves with churchians, and those churchians reinforce each other's beliefs, whether they're true or not, or biblical or not. And that's just the state of things. I can't fix that. I can't do anything about it. When people talk about the church, I often ask them, what is the church? Are you talking about something that has 4 walls and a roof because you're going to the church? Jesus talked about the church. The people tell me, well, you need to go to church. What is church? Is it a 501c3 corporation? In which case it's made itself subservient to the laws of God, of man, and not God. I mean, there's a lot of definitions there, and definitions we've learned in past talks that definitions are very important, especially if you're in the realm of commerce, or you're in a court, or you're talking to a cop or a CPS agent or an FBI agent or somebody else, a magistrate, a judge, a federal judge, what have you, a tax assessor. All those folks speak a different language, whether they realize it or not. They speak a different language, and it's legalese, and that language is different than English. So you've got your body. We know that we've got the body. So, but what powers the body? Okay, the spirit. And we often hear the phrase, well, maybe not. It's an antiquated phrase. The triune God. What is the triune God? And I've heard people say, well, God has 3 facets. God doesn't have 3 facets. Now I know trust law. I know trust law well. Okay. I understand trust law and the basic foundation of it. Okay. You start getting me into the dozens of different trusts. Yes, I'm going to get lost just like you, but I have a good understanding and foundation of what the trusts are. All right. And with a trust, you also have 3 aspects to a trust. You have the executor who sets the laws. You have the trustee who acts with the executor sets the laws for the trustee. The trustee acts with the trust property for the benefit of the beneficiary, and the beneficiary usually appoints the executor. And of course, you also have to have a grantor to start the trust, right? So real quick, let's do this. I'm going to find something, and we're going to cover trust law just really briefly. I mean, the most brief trust law that you've ever had. And I did not bring this document up before I started, so give me just a moment. This is going to be a crash trust law course. It's going to take about 4 minutes. Let's see what I can find here. This is a document that I probably haven't brought up in years, but it would do good for folks who are watching this video later. Okay. I think we got it. Okay. So I'm going to do screen sharing. And for those of you who are watching this video later, you can listen to the audio and you don't have to watch the video, but the video will supply a lot for you. So I would suggest not driving. If you're driving while watching my video, stop, please. Screen sharing. I'm getting faster at this stuff. All right. Okay, I'm just going to share my whole screen. You can pick different screens to share, but I'm just going to share my whole screen. And we're going to do a thing on trust law. So if you're watching this video after it's recorded, you'll get to freeze frame this and read it. I'm not going to read this, but it's there for folks later. And I'll have this video up soon. There's a couple videos, 2 or 3 meetings that we've had that I've not uploaded the videos. Those will get uploaded soon. By the way, I just got over a stomach virus. So if you're waiting on a response from me, that's why, because I didn't care about anything for about 2 days. So I'll leave this screen up. This is the second page. All right. So we're going to start with shipping law. If there's nobody that can't see my screen, you holler and we'll see what's wrong. So let's pretend for just a second that you are on one side of the Mediterranean, I'm on the other, and you have a farm where you're going to raise grapes. And you're going to take those grapes and you're going to convert them into products, be they jellies, jams, or wine, vinegar, whatnot. But you can't sell all the grapes that you raise to the people around you. So you're going to want to send some of those grapes across the Mediterranean to a merchant who can sell the rest of your wares on the other side of the Mediterranean to the folks around him and further south. And so what are we going to do? We're going to engage in shipping law. Okay. So the first thing we had to engage in many years ago was shipping law. And if you're going to engage in shipping law, you're engaging in the law of the sea. Some folks like to call that admiralty. And so you're going to find a captain. And the captain is going to, you're going to be the one, you'll see up here, number 1, you are going to put the goods, you are the grantor, you're going to put the products on the ship, but you've got to find a ship. And a ship usually with a captain. So you're going to find a captain and a ship, and the captain's going to have a crew. And what's the captain's job? The captain is to set policy for the crew, to tell the crew what to do. He's going to dictate to the crew what to do. And ideally, you want a very competent captain. The crew acts with the property for the benefit of the cargo holder. Who's the cargo holder? Well, that's the beneficiary. That's you, right? And the cargo holder, the guy that has the cargo, he's the one that gets to appoint the captain in the first place. If the captain sinks the ship, then you didn't do a very good job of choosing a captain, or the captain maybe just got a raw deal. But the captain is going to be, it's in his best interest to handle that cargo safely. So you grant into this relationship the initial property, which is the goods, right? Go find a captain. The captain hires a crew. The crew acts for the benefit of the cargo, right? Which is you, the cargo holder, right? And the person who owns the cargo is the guy that hires the captain in the first place. All right. And here's another page that some people can read later. We're going to move on. All right. So after a little while, this stuff also began starting applied to businesses. Okay. And trusts. And what is a trust? Well, a trust has to have something valuable in it. It has to have some kind of property, a dollar in gold. It has to have real property. Okay. You may be able to start some trust in the modern era with fiat currency or debits in a bank account or something. I'm not real sure. Don't care. That's something I might get into later. I might not. However, usually there has to be real property in a trust: land, a vehicle, a machine, something. And so the grantor starts trust, and the executor is the one that sets the policy for the trust. Okay. The trustee is the one who acts with the property for the benefit of the beneficiary, and the beneficiary is usually the one that appoints the executor. Just depends on how the trust is set up, but that's how it goes. That's the flow. Starting to see a pattern here. All right. So corporate law. What do corporations have? Corporations have a CEO or president, right? Chief executive officer, right? You could put the words United States in here, or IBM, or McDonald's, or Walmart, or you could probably put your all caps name in here too. The all first, middle, last name thing too, because that's also a trust. Okay. CEOs set the policy for the employees. The employees act with the property for the benefit of the shareholder. Shareholders usually have a board if it's a big company, right? So you've got a board that governs over the shareholders and their interests, okay? And the shareholders, the board of shareholders, they can usually, I think, fire the CEO or remove the CEO. It just depends on how things are set up, okay? So are you starting to see a very similar thing here? How all this kind of just fits together, okay? Corporate law, trust law, shipping law. Well, we got one more. We got God's law. God's the father. He's the grand executor. The employee who handles his property here is called the Holy Ghost. He is the trustee. What is a trustee? A trustee is form without substance. It does not matter who the employee is who serves the fries at McDonald's as long as there is an employee there. That's why people often in a corporate world feel like they're just cogs in a machine, because they literally are just cogs. You have no attachment to any one particular cog. If it breaks or if it's not functioning well or if it's not a good fit for the machine, what do? Remove it, toss it, put a new cog in. And that is what I did in the corporate world. I worked for a couple of Fortune 100 companies, and I hired and fired thousands of people, and some of them were good employees. And that was a world that I was in for 6 or 8 years, and it was not my world. I got good at it, and that's why I quit, because I could see myself getting good at it, and that is not the person that I wanted to be, because I'm not a large corporation type of person. So you've got God the Father, the grand executor. He gives the ultimate laws, right? The Holy Ghost acts as a trustee. Who's the beneficiary? Well, God's Son. Who is God's Son since Jesus' work on the cross? Man, right? And we can choose to follow God, or we can choose not to follow God, right? God is the ultimate grantor, all right? The Holy Ghost is the ultimate trustee, and man is the beneficiary for everything that is around you, okay? And that is a very, very brief covering of trust law. I don't know if other people teach that way. I don't know if other people have explained it that way. That's the way I explain it. That's the way I've internalized it. And anytime I look at a trust, I know that the basic breakdown is what I just showed you. It makes things much easier. Now, if you really want your mind blown, I can show you something else. Watch this. Since you understand the trust thing now, we're going to do screen sharing one more time. As soon as I find the button. And I'm going to bring up a whiteboard, right? And I'm also going to grab my handy dandy little pen that I used to write on my screen, which I should have probably had out, but not. So if there's anyone who cannot see the drawing that I'm putting on the screen, please let me know. But I think you should be able to. We're gonna set 2 jurisdictions here. Okay, we're gonna set the private. Forgive the handwriting. I'm writing on a computer screen, so don't expect much. And we're gonna put another one here called the public. Right, and I know some of you have seen me graph this out before, but I assure you that in the avenue of trust that we've gone down, this is going to go slightly different. Okay, I'm not sure if I've explained this before. I might have. If I have, then you get a repeat. Okay. Won't take but about, I don't know, 3 minutes here. So you were born and your parents created a name. Okay, so they gave you a name, right? And that's your given name. Okay, and let's just say that is John James, and then they give you a family name, okay, or a surname, and that was inherited. Okay, that was inherited. You didn't have any choice. Your parents didn't have any choice. And we'll call it Jones. Okay, so John James Jones. What's that for a name? Can you tell I make this stuff up as it goes? Well, almost all of it. So you were given a birth certificate. Now, the birth certificate may have said something different on it because these hospitals order these blank forms from these publishing companies. And most of them practice the old pagan ritual of putting blood or a footprint on the document. That is a shipping document. That is a proof of goods. It's a receipt. It's a what do they call it? A shipping ladle of goods. And it is a birth certificate. Now, the one that I had until I recently set it out on my front porch and lost it was made in 1974. It had my footprint on it in blue ink, ironically enough, and it said certificate of birth on the front. But at the very bottom on the back, it said birth certificate in very small print. It was like the manufacturer knew what they were doing, but they wanted to follow the modern convention of calling it a certificate of birth. It's a birth certificate. It's a private document, which is why if you take that document down to the DMV and try to get a license or apply for something with it within the democracy, you will not get much done because they can't use that document. They can't see it. The public cannot do business with the private normally and openly. Okay. There's a portal by which they can do business with the private, but they won't do it openly. They will not acknowledge the existence. The public will not acknowledge the existence of the private. Your parents sent that off because your mother or your father acted as an informant. Think about that for just a second. As soon as you popped out of the womb, there was an informant, right? And who cut the cord? Probably a government agent. Now, you may say, no, it was a doctor or a nurse. Well, did that doctor or nurse hold a public license? If so, they were a public official. And so the government literally separated you from your mother, right? And so they sent this birth certificate off and they got back a certificate of birth, right? That's a certificate of title. And they created John James Jones, all caps. We all know that all caps. Caps really don't matter. It's the first name, middle name, last name thing that is what it is. It's the public name. All right. And this is called a legal name. Now we know that over here we have over here in the private, we have common law, right? We know that over here in the public, we have codes and statutes and so on, right? We know that over here in the private, we have the post office, and we know that over here in the public, we have the United States Postal Service. Over here in the private, we have the United States of America, where it's written in all lowercase except for the A or whatnot, like the Declaration of Independence. And over here in the public, we have the United States of America that's written in all capital letters. It just goes on and on. Okay. Over here on the left, you have unlimited liability. Unlimited liability. You are liable for all of your actions. It's not necessarily a bad thing. If someone is liable for your actions, then they are also able to control your actions, just like an employer, right? So when you say that you are John James Jones in the public and you show a license, a public license from the democracy, because over here, this is the republic, and this is the democracy. People say, oh, we're a democracy. No, we're spreading democracy. Oh, no, we're a republic. We're a constitutional republic. We're both. There's two forms of government in this country running side by side beside each other. Now, we're going to wipe away this stuff, and I'm going to put the words private and public back, and I'm going to show you how this squares up with trust law. All right? So over here, we're going to put private, just like we had it a moment ago. This work, okay? And we're going to hear. Well, your parents were, right? Up till the age, I think, the age of 14, then you be your own executor. Why 14? I think 14 is the age of majority. Okay. Does that mean I'm saying 14 is the legal age? I am not. We're not talking legal. We're talking lawful. Go back in years past and research. Most folks at the age of 14 can get married. They could enter into contracts. They could sue, be sued, start a business, and so on. Of course, that was back in a time when people were raised different, or a hell of a lot more mature than what they are now, generally speaking. Okay. So here, right, we've got the public, we've got democracy. Here's the republic. I'm interchanging.
Houston, we have a problem.
Yeah, hang on just a second. I'm gonna, hopefully he knows that he's offline. We've had storms in Kentucky all day, so hopefully it wasn't, the internet didn't fail.
Hey, since there's a pause here, I jumped in a little late. What is he talking about tonight?
He began with the structure of trust, and he was moving on to how that affects us, and then he got cut off.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and his phone's dead too, so I'm not sure. 'Cause I just tried to call him. I'm sure he's working hard to get back online, whatever the problem is.
I have a question you might be able to answer. Is John Dawson also Bill Farrell, or are they two separate people?
I'm sorry, that's classified information, sir.
Maybe yes, maybe no. Depends who's asking.
Just little old me.
And who are you really?
I'm a nobody. I'm a living man. I have my ANC and everything. We're good to go.
On a side rail, I've been occasionally perusing through several First Amendment audit videos. Does anyone here watch any of those?
I watched quite a few of them.
Yeah,
I find it fascinating that if any of those, big name auditors had a half of the information that we've been discussing over the past year or two, how they would handle their audits differently. And actually whether their audits would be as popular as they are now, or whether they'd be kind of suppressed and shadow banned a bit or something like that.
All right, I just talked to Bill and he said that everything he lost everything, internet, phone. He got notifications for emergency calls only. So I'm sure it has something to do with the towers, his local towers and the storms we're having. So he said, just hang on a couple minutes and he's going to reboot everything and see if he can't get back online.
So does him bailing on this meeting doesn't affect this open channel, right? So he doesn't have to actually physically be here.
Well, right now the Zoom's still going, it's still recording, but he's not in it. So, at the end, like when he saves it, he can just edit all this part out. But he said if he can't get back online, then what he'll do is he'll just finish recording later as soon as he gets his computer back, and then he'll upload the whole video onto the YouTube channel. Like if he can't rejoin us to finish.
Tell him he probably better edit this part out.
But it takes a couple minutes when he unplugs and replugs everything in. So we'll just hang out a minute and hopefully he can join again.
I'm gonna go fetch my coffee.
Yeah, bathroom break. Hang on just a second. Here he is. Hold on. Okay, so he said, yeah, he's not going to get back online tonight. What he's going to do is he's going to take all the information that he's already given us and then add on everything that he was going to give, like the rest of the call, and he'll have it online by noon tomorrow is the plan. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording once I figure out how to stop the recording.
Do you have administrative?
I am. I'm co-host, but that doesn't mean I know what I'm doing. Let's see here. I'm at the bottom and let's see, we've got chat, meeting settings. Maybe it's under there. Nope.
Yeah, meeting set. No?
Not there. Hold on. We'll just keep on looking. You know what? I don't think I'm a co-host anymore because the first time he called, it booted me from the meeting and then I had to join again. So I'm not a host anymore.
RJ's the host.
All right. So RJ can stop the recording and end the meeting.
Are you getting that stuff we just got?
Well, what he'll do is it's all recorded, but
Know what I mean? Are y'all getting that front going through right now that just passed us?
well, where are you located?
I'm in Bama.
Oh, well, I don't know, but I know there's been tornado sirens going off in all parts of Kentucky today.
Yep.
And we've
Yeah,
had
good.
severe thunderstorms.
Just north of us.
So what kind of levels of, well, I guess knowledge, information about the ANC is this group have? I'm new, this is my first time. and I had some questions about the ANC, that assumed name certificate.
Well, it's pretty extensive. I mean, do you, did you find the group through the YouTube channel or how did you find?
Yeah,
The group.
originally it was through the YouTube. And then I got
Okay.
a link to the Facebook group. And
Okay.
then I got a link to this meeting. And so here I am. Figured I'd try it out, see what's up. I listened to those videos and I got, a couple questions that I asked him in the comments of his YouTube. I never really got a response. So I wanted to talk to him tonight, if that's Bill, which is.
Yeah, that would be Bill. And he loves to talk about the ANC and would love to answer your questions. How
How
about
did
you?
RJ become the host?
I don't
This
know.
is his first meeting. RJ, can you give Courtney the host or co-host capability so she can stop the recording and then she can give it to Bill/John?
It's like one of the first times I've been on Zoom. What am I looking for?
Hang on.
Okay,
Hang on. I'm going to click over. Bill's calling again. Hang on.
okay, so RJ, maybe in participants, you can, when you click on Courtney, you can make her a co-host.
Where
Because
do
you've
I-
got hosting power right now.
So where's that button again?
Probably in the lower menu, like the low bar, there might be a
Yep.
menu that says participants.
Okay, there it is, 10,
So if
okay.
you click on it, you might be able to right click on Courtney and designate her as a co-host or
I'm
as
back.
a host.
Okay, I can make her the host. All right, there. You want
Yeah,
to
then
change the
sh-
host to Courtney? Whoa, that's a lot of power. All right.
Yeah, man, you got the Willy Wonka tickets just for signing in. Wow.
All right, Courtney, you're now the host.
Awesome. Well, we're going to wait another minute because that was Bill and he said he might be getting back online. So
He just texted me and said his own internet's out. So unless he's gonna come back by using the app on his phone,
that
that's
might
the only
be
way I can think how he can do it if he has no actual internet.
And Courtney, you're the host now, so now you can stop the recording if you need to. You should be able to.
Okay.
It should be in the lower menu. Are you finding it?
Well, I'm using my phone.
Why do you guys
Oh.
stop the recording?
I'm just going to leave it for a minute until, just give me a second here. Play, general.
Anyway, I guess one of my questions, I'm just gonna throw it out there, see what the group knows. Why, of all the ANCs I'm seeing, I don't really see anybody putting any kind of qualifiers to their like signature on the, the application. Why is that? Why, I mean, what a great opportunity if you wanted to preserve anything. It's, that time when you fill out that ANC application on the Secretary of State website. And yeah, I'm just wondering if anybody had any thoughts on that.
What kind of what do you mean by
Well,
qualifying?
we see it all the time on other things, all rights reserved without prejudice, without recourse, trustee, authorized rep. You know what I'm saying? Those little qualifiers people put before and after their signature, whether electronically or handwritten.
Right. I'd be curious what any additional power or authority that would give that form,
Well, it's
which
about,
is what,
it's
yeah, I
all,
know,
that
which I
whole
mean,
it's all about who you're dealing with, right? I mean, that's what I thought anyway.
Yeah. A lot of it too
what
is,
it does,
Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was just thinking, to me, using those qualifiers and things like that is for the signer's benefit to proclaim in whatever you're signing that you know who you are. Okay. And the majority of what when you're filling out these forms and you're basically just doing a technical legal process that actually very few people handle. I mean, there's hardly anyone looking at what's going on in there. And
Well, when you fill out the Minnesota ANC, it's all online. You can put a lot of things on there.
right, you
I'm
could.
seeing, based on how the field works, the information field, the square, the box, fill in the blank. Online, it's like you can go forever. Well, I shouldn't say forever, but it gives you quite a few characters to play with. And so I'm thinking, well,
Right.
why not use that as an opportune time to put in your qualifiers, that you're co-bet. I mean, because what we're doing is we're registering an unregistered organization, a state issued organization. We're registering it. Well, it's still theirs. It's still the state's. So why not, put in a little more detail who you exactly are as the holder and what position you're playing. Because otherwise if you're registering that all caps name, from where I'm seeing it, you're already trespassing.
Meeting settings.
If you try saying it's yours, you're holding that state organization. You're in control of it. And you want to let anybody else know your position. That's how I'm seeing it. I mean, I could be totally wrong in the way I'm thinking here, but I'm trying to bounce it off other minds just to
Well,
see
real
if
quick.
I know that I'm not going crazy.
Okay. Who's the gal that
Anybody hear me?
Oh, there we go. Now I got it. Bill's back
All right,
on.
well, I can't hear
It just-
anybody else. So let me fix
Hello,
that
hello.
freaking problem and maybe we'll start back again.
No, we're talking at you.
Let me
Let's
just
No, everybody.
you do your audio settings or something to unblock audio so you can listen.
Yeah,
Ah,
hold
but you
on. Let
can't
me
hear-
go.
Well, I'm saying it.
I think I'm back in. So if can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yes,
They really do not want to talk about this stuff, huh? Sorry, folks. My cell phone, I couldn't use my internet. Like
Can you
I
hear
was
us
dead.
now?
in the wa- Yeah. Like my router went dead, modem went dead, my cell phone went dead, everything died. It was like somebody went through with a jammer. I don't know.
but your power
All
stayed
right,
on?
so what's that?
But your power stayed on?
Yeah, power stayed on.
power-
I connect to Yep, power stayed on. I mean, I connect to the internet via AT&T, but I also have an AT&T cell phone. I couldn't even make phone calls. It's emergency calls only. So, I don't know if we're recording or not.
We are.
All right, well, we'll jump right back into it. It's going to be a
We'll
fun
just have
video
to edit out the middle.
I reckon a large part of it. Man, like I'm standing here and I'm like, everything's dead. At least I got electricity.
And you don't have a stomach bug.
Oh my God, thank goodness. Okay, I'm just going to go back to the whiteboard and we'll go back to what we were talking about. See how this works out. All right. So, let me move some things around here. All right, so over here is the public. I'm going to finish this up and then we'll finish up our talk. We'll take about a minute and then we'll get to questions. All right, so over here in the private, if that's making a solid line or not. Over here in the private, so we know that we know how the whole thing works. We have the executor, we have the trustee, Notice that a trustee and an employee are very similar. And over here we have the beneficiary. All right. And so we got the public trust and we have the private trust. So over here, we have, and I'm just going to use John Doe. We have John of the Doe family. Okay. And over here we have, John Doe. We'll just write it like that. So at age, who's the executor? Parents are the executor. At least I think this is where we left off at. The parents are the executor up until you reach age 14, and you become your own executor in the private. All right. Now, who's the beneficiary to all this? Well, no man would make any system where he's not the beneficiary of the system. Creators always get the benefit of the creation, right? So who is the beneficiary? Well, you are. You're the executor, and you're the beneficiary. Now, in trust law, you can hold two positions within the trust, generally. Some trust types are different depending on which jurisdiction they're in. But you cannot hold three, because if you hold all three positions, there's no one to trust. Get it? So we create this thing called government to do those things that we don't want to do over and over and over and over. Who sets the policy for government? We do. Government acts for the benefit of us, right? That's how it works in the private. But in the public, it is a mirror image. This is a mirror image of each one, okay? You've heard the old Masonic thing, as above, so below. Here we go, as above, so below, right? So who is the executor in the public? Who can tell you you have to put on a seatbelt in order to drive down the road? Can't do more than 55 on this road, but you can't do more than 20 here, and you have to stop here. I wrote God. I did not mean to write God. I meant to write government, okay? I've got God on my mind. So who's the beneficiary in the public? So if you pay a ticket, who gets the money? If I punch you in the nose and the police come and arrest me, you've just outsourced your claim to a private for-profit entity. They don't pay you the money unless you go to the trouble of suing me. So if I punch you in the nose and it breaks a law that's a D felony, and they hit me with a D felony and I have to pay $10,000 and serve 3 years in jail, who gets the benefit of that? The government. So who's the trustee? Well, the only one left. What do trustees do? Trustees do what they're told. They are employees. So if you are acting as if you are this all caps name, then you are a trustee. You are an employee, and you will do what you're told. Okay. That's why when you go to court and they ask you to plead guilty or not guilty, it is dishonorable to plead not guilty. Why? Because when you plead not guilty, what does guilty mean? What does the word guilty come from? The root of it is gilded. What's gilded? To apply gold to, like to gild the edges of a book so the mice wouldn't chew on it, right? You make it more valuable. When you gild something, you make it valuable. So when you go to court and the judge says, next case, the state versus John Doe. Is John Doe here? You stand up and you say, yeah, that's me, Your Honor. I'm John Doe. You've just said that you are the debtor who is responsible for this account. And the second the judge says, are you pleading guilty or not guilty? Well, I'm pleading not guilty. You just said I'm not paying. I'm not paying. I am the one that owns this account. I am this entity. I'm responsible for the debts. I am the debtor and I'm not paying. So what should happen once you plead not guilty? Well, they should just put you straight in jail, but they don't, because they have to kind of keep this whole ruse going. Because if they did do that, then people might start trying to figure out who the hell they are. Why did this guy just put everybody in jail at the second they say not guilty? The honorable thing to do is to pay. And in the democracy, the way that you pay is with your signature. That's the great thing about the democracy. It's not necessarily a bad system, We just have a system full of people who have no idea who they are. They have no idea where they live. They have no idea who their nation is. They don't know who they are. Okay. So we're going to talk just for a second about who we are, which I kind of expected this to be done by 8:30 and it's now 9 o'clock, but that's okay. We'll make it quick. So I'm going to stop sharing for a second. I'm going to go back to the screen. All right. So who are we? So we have this thing called a body. What powers the body? Okay. The body is powered by the spirit. The spirit is what makes the claims. It's the battery via the vessel of the body. Okay. So you got body. It's a dead entity. There's no, like this shall return to dust. That's what God tells us. As you were, so shall ye be. God breathed life into us. We sinned. We created a system where there is sin. God had to back away because a holy God can't stand in the presence of a bunch of debtors. What's debt? Debt is sin. Okay. So we're all covered in debt. We're all covered in sin. Okay. But God did this work on the cross via who? His beneficiary. He sent his beneficiary who got crucified on a big accounting cross. See how all this stuff interrelates? It's not because the system is, this Christianity was built off the system. It's because this system was built off the truth. Satan has rules. He may be the prince of this world, but he still has rules. He has very strict rules that he cannot violate, right? Read Job if you don't think Satan don't have rules. He had to ask God for permission to break them. So you have the spirit makes the claims. It's the battery via the vessel of the body. There's a third part. So you got the body, you got the spirit. But where's the will? We all have free will, right? That means we all have a soul. The soul is the third part. The will. The soul has the opportunity to make claims on names. It's commercial names, trade names. That's what they call the statutes. Trade names. Georgia has trade names, right? I don't know what country other folks on this call may be in, or other people who listen to this, but look in your country's laws. If you have a central bank, then I guarantee you have a trade name system. And I've not even looked, except for maybe a couple countries. My soul makes the claim to an internationally protected person who uses an assumed name. Let me repeat that. My soul makes the claim to an internationally protected person who uses an assumed name. A lot of people, and I did this at first before I went further along in my understanding. I'm going to share one more time my screen. I'm going to clear all this crap off as soon as I figure out how to do so. I got layers on layers in this thing. Okay, here we go. A lot of people make the thought that, okay, so like let's take the name John James. Okay, Dosen, or John James Doe. Okay, a lot of people think that this James Doe is the legal name, and John, and I'm going to write this really old-fashioned. John James of the Doe family. And before anybody messages me who's watching this and say that these two names are the same, that's crap. If I tell you to go file something in file A1, and you instead go file it in file A1, those aren't the same. One is uppercase and one is lowercase. What is the same is not different, and what is different is not the same. These two names are different. John James of the Doe family is different than John James Doe. It's obviously different. I have to write it different in a different format. Okay. So when you've got these two names right here, a lot of people call this the legal name. Well, these are both legal names. There's no difference. Names are names. What are names? Names are symbols and sounds put together. That's it. That's all they are. They're sounds put together to make a word, and they're symbols put together to make a visual written word. That's all they are. That's what a name is. Well, but names are important. Names are very important. We're taught that in scripture. What's the very first job that man had? Naming the animal, right? for us to engage in commerce, we have to have a name. We do not have to have this name, but it sure does come in handy because the public cannot see anything outside of the public. The public cannot recognize anything outside of the public, because if they recognize the private, they would cease to exist. And I know that sounds like a major statement, but as you think through this, it will make more sense. Okay. So these two names are both legal names, really. Okay. What is the portal from the public to the private? What is the portal that exists that allows the private to communicate with the public? It's the post office. The post office is in the private. The United States Postal Service, which, by the way, evidently was not even created until the early 70s, is in the public. Okay. So we've got that split right there between the post office still exists. And if you walk in and talk to the average clerk or even the average postmaster, they'll say those two things are the same. I guarantee you they are not. The post office is a private entity and the USPS is a public entity. The rate of postage in the post office has not changed from 2 cents for postcards and small 1 ounce or less mailings since 1770 something. Okay. First Postmaster General, Ben Franklin, right? So this is the portal between the public and the private. You hear people say, oh, the post office is going to go away because they can't pay their debts. Things on that. Number one, the only time that the United States Postal Service has ever entered into the red in their accounting was in 2000 and I can't remember, but it was recently. And the reason is they were required by Congress to fund their pensions until 2075. There are people who have not been born yet who've had their pensions funded. Why? Because the United States Post Office is so incredibly important to maintaining a country. If you dissolve the post office, you dissolve the country. If you don't believe that, Hollywood told you in a little movie called The Postman with what was that dude's name? Played in Runs with Wolves, Cries with Wolves, something like that. Kevin Costner. Watch the movie The Postman with Kevin Costner. What happens when we have an apocalypse and there is no governing authority except for your roving gangs? This guy, Kevin Costner, plays the postman. He finds a bag of mail, and I'm pulling back from the 1990s when I watch this, okay? He finds a bag of mail and decides he's going to deliver it to people. He inadvertently recreates the post office, which inadvertently creates government. Government is not bad. And for the record, I'm not anti-government. I worked for the government, some of the deepest, darkest reaches of the government for many years. I'm not against the government. I'm against ignorance. That's what I'm against. So these are both legal names. John James Doe, John James of the Doe family. One's private, one's public. The public cannot recognize the private. You'll never get them to do it in court. That's why when you walk into court and you say, I'm a living man, they're going to look at you like you're heir and they're going to keep going. They cannot recognize you. If they did, our entire court system would crumble. It would stop. The public would dissolve. They can't do that. Okay. So when I said internationally protected person, what do I mean? John James Doe. Have you ever seen attorneys and how they write their name? I'm just going to clear all this off because it's getting a little bit crowded. How does John James Doe? So let's say I decide to become a lawyer. Here I am, Mr. John James Doe. How does John James Doe get his bar card? Well, he probably gets it under the name John James Doe. But what does John James Doe start doing as soon as he gets into law practice? He starts writing his name, John J. Doe. Okay. Capitalization isn't important. I don't care. This is an internationally protected person. I'm not going to explain why right now. That's your job. Go figure that one. This is an internationally protected person. And when you say person, understand the definition in Black's Law different. We think of it as a body. That's not true. Person is a corporate entity. Okay. So that is an internationally protected person. So what am I? A soul. And what is the most basic fundamental truth statement that I can make? The most basic fundamental truth statement that I can make. The most basic fundamental truth statement that I can make is that I am a living, breathing soul. That's it. God tells us in scripture, very basically, who he is. He says, I am. That's the shortest, most complete, that's the shortest complete sentence in the English language that I know of. I, capital I, am, A-M, dot, period, done, period. What's a period? Go look up the word period in Black's Law Dictionary, okay? John J. Doe, there's a period in there. There's a reason for that. There's a reason that attorneys write their names like that, okay? We have another video where we talk about general partnerships. And you see the last names like Doe, Jacobson, and Johnson, attorneys at law. There's a reason that they create general partnerships amongst the legal profession. And there's the reason 98, 99% of all your judges and all your attorneys write their name John J. Doe. It's because that's an internationally protected person. They're doing a nod and a wink, and they're removing themselves. They're giving themselves a perception of liability. But there is no liability for the public from folks who are responsibly acting in the private. None. Not if you're in the right, if you're being honorable. Okay. What's the basic truth statement? I am a living, breathing soul who makes claim to an internationally protected person who is doing business as this entity in the democracy. And that is a lot of information. And it took me a long time to get to that point. It took me a lot of trial and error. It took some screw ups. The other day, me and a very close friend of mine were going through some documents, and she saw some documents and she said, "What in the world is this?" I said, "Hey, I've tried a lot of stuff." When I say I tried a lot of stuff, this was stuff that was entered into court records. And I look back on the stuff that I did, and it's embarrassing because I didn't know who I was. And by not knowing who I was, I made a fool of myself. And I have a feeling that in 10 years, I'll look back on today and feel the same way about me now as I do 10 years ago about how I feel right now about how I was 10 years ago. If that makes sense. Like I'm 48. Yeah, I'll soon be 49. I'm 48. And I was probably as much of an idiot at 38 as I'll feel that I'm at 48 when I'm 58. That's just the way the world works. I would love to go back to my 25-year-old self and not have the aches and pains in the morning, but I would not trade the maturity, wisdom, and knowledge that I have now for anything in the world. And so when you figure out who you are, a lot of questions about what should I do on the paperwork, what name should I put, should I do this, should I do those questions answer themselves once you understand who you are. I look over my old paperwork and I'm like, man, I was an idiot. Look at how I wrote that. Look at how I said that. Look at what I told the judge. I got some stuff right. I got a lot of stuff wrong. And so I don't know if I'll be in court again very soon. I may be. By all hints of what's going on around me, I might very well be. And if I am, it's going to be a completely different matter than what it's been in the past. And I hope that I can act with more grace, more dignity, and more honor than I've ever acted. I hope I can be more cool, more collected, and more wise than I've ever been before, because that's the goal. That's where we're going. I mean, the ultimate goal is to be like God. That's what we strive to do. And if you read John 18 and you see how Jesus was during his trial, don't be nervous that you're going to court. Read about Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. I mean, he wanted to pass the cup. He really did. And when we go to court, it is very similar. I mean, we don't suffer near what our Lord did on the cross, but there's still suffering. It's still difficult. It's still hard. And so when you get called in court, or you have a public official walking up to your door and they knock on your door and they say, "Hi, my name's Officer so and so. I'm with the government and I need your help answering a couple questions." That is your first test. That's your first test. Jesus had that test. What happened to him? The Pharisees would question him and try to catch him. Why? And they were ready to kill him on the spot. There was a couple times that they would have, but he walked out from amongst them, right? Because he was God, he could do that. And so we get tested too. And the first test usually comes with a knock at the door. So we can't get away from that. We cannot stop the world from coming in. I know that there's people who just want to bar themselves in and keep the public out. I know, I've tried that. It doesn't work very well. Very, very time consuming. It'll make you very anxious, and it'll give you more than a few gray hairs. So with all that said, do we have any questions? And maybe we'll stay connected long enough to answer them.
Yeah, I got one.
Hi, is that Rob?
I'm new here.
Hi, Rob.
Yeah, I was going over for the assumed name situation. We got now the first part of it, as far as the all caps name and address and everything's fine.
Yep.
When I got down to where you put your name and the address, you put the zip code in there. And I haven't used the zip code in a long time. Somebody told me anytime you use that zip code that you're having to do with a corporation, which you get the post office and then you get the USPS.
Right.
Zip code would be in the public, and then you get the post office in the private.
Yep. Well, you can put a zip code on. Go ahead.
Mhm.
You can put a zip code on a document. There's nothing wrong with that, even if you're doing a private document. My suggestion is you use the four corners rule. You've heard of the four corners rule?
Yeah.
My suggestion is you just put a box around it. I mean, we don't really have boxes that we can do easily on a computer. I mean, I guess you can,
Brackets.
but brackets work. Brackets set it apart. Yeah. And so you can still use that stuff to help out the post office. You know, the road that I live on back years ago went by a rural route, and people, I go in and talk to the postal clerks and the postmaster and stuff, and I kind of like to keep these people on my side because I need them. And so I've asked them before, you know, do you all guys still get letters with rural routes? And the guy told me, one of the guys told me, he said, "Man, we still get letters with just names on them, like John Doe, Clark County, Kentucky," right? And they still deliver the stuff. If they know how to find them, they still deliver it. But I believe in having sympathy on your United States Postal Service clerk and helping them out and helping the system out, because a large part of the system operates off of automation, and that automation operates off of optical character recognition. And so I believe that you should help your system out. So you can go ahead and put a zip code on there. I even mail letters privately using a 2-cent stamp with a zip code on it. I just put the zip code in brackets. That
My
way it
thing
just,
is totally separating myself from up here down here.
well,
you
if
don't
that's
use
what
the
you
US
want to do and that's what you need to do it. I mean,
Well,
you've got to
it's-
do. Go ahead.
I said, my mail still gets where it's going if I send something. Already, I can't remember the last time I used a zip code.
Well, if it works for you, use it. I mean, I'm not afraid to use the
Yeah.
zip code. I'm not afraid to use these things. People often call me and they'll say, "Look, I just got this form from such and such agency, or I got this form from my kid's school or whatever." And they'll say, "You know, how do I fill this form out?" I'm like, well, the only thing that they're going to understand in all of those boxes on that form is the public person, that legal name. There's nothing wrong with using that legal name. Use it. Use the legal name, use the zip code, use the social. now the date of birth is something I actually have a little bit of contention with lately, and I can explain that here in a moment. But I don't have any problem. I'm not afraid to use that business entity, and I'll use the zip code and everything. But when I'm trying to stay in the private, I know how to write it so that I'm not crossing jurisdictional boundaries. And I recently discovered that I've been crossing jurisdictional boundaries with the date of birth. And the reason is that on my certificate of birth, which is the document that I have from the United States government, well, not the United States, from the Commonwealth of Kentucky, that's from the Department of Vital Statistics, that actually has the first, middle, last name on it. There's actually two birth dates on that document. One is called a birth date, and the other one is called a file date. And
Right.
when we're asked for the birth date and we're trying to stay in the private, and we give the date that we came out of our mother's womb, or let's just say we're using the public entity, the first, middle, last name, and we give the date that we came out of our mother's womb, we're actually crossing jurisdictional boundaries. And I think we're making a claim to being that all caps entity that we don't want to claim to be. It's okay to use that entity, just like it's okay for me to go to, if you own a business named McDonald's and I go to court for you because you appointed me CFO for the day, it's okay for me to walk into court and say, I'm the CFO of McDonald's, right? If that's what position I hold, right? I can say I'm the CFO of McDonald's, but it wouldn't be kosher for me to walk in and say I am McDonald's. And I
Correct.
think we're crossing boundaries with the birth date and the file date. The birth date is the date that I came out of my mother's womb, and some government agent cut the cord and jobbed me full of vaccines. Well, I probably shouldn't even use that word, right? This is going on YouTube later, so I may have to edit a lot. What happened was I was birthed. I came out of my mother's womb on this date. 6 weeks later is the file date. So I came out of my mother's womb in February. The file date isn't until March. When I use that all caps entity and they ask for the birth date of that entity, if you look up what birth means, and in accordance to the, not the World Economic Forum, but the,
So the birth
yeah.
certificate was born on the filing date.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the file date is the actual birth date, because birth in the public actually means expulsion of a product. You can look that definition up with the I think it's the United Nations. Look that up. World Economic Forum, no, United Nations. Look up the United Nations definition of birth. It's the expulsion of a product.
Yep.
What got expelled when that all caps name was created? Yeah, it was the birth certificate. It wasn't us. My birth date, the date that I came out of my mother's womb, is separate. So I'm okay with using these things. We just got to have enough cognizance to know what's what. And that gets back to what we talked about of knowing who the hell you are. Because if you don't know who you are, those things, when I looked at that, another thing that popped into my head the other day when I was looking at my certificate of live birth from the Department of Vital Statistics from the Commonwealth of Kentucky, right next to that entity that says the first, middle, last name, it says child's name. So the second that we hand that document to any government official, we're claiming, if we claim to be that entity, if we claim that we are the first, middle, last name, if you walk into court and somebody says, who the hell are you? And you say, I'm John Edward Dosen. I'm that middle, last name. What is your legal name? What legal name do you own is what the judge is asking. What should come out of our mouths? Something like, I don't own any legal name. It would be like walking into court and somebody saying, this is the Commonwealth of Kentucky versus McDonald's. Are you McDonald's? And us saying, yeah, I'm McDonald's. Well, then we could go to jail for McDonald's. McDonald's can't go to jail. McDonald's is just a business. It's just a corporate entity. So I think we're crossing these wires and we don't understand who we are. But once we separate those entities and understand who we are, it becomes very easy to fill out these documents. It becomes easy to mail. It becomes easy to interact with these agents. Because if a cop walked up to me right now and said, what is your name? I mean, I'd die and burn in Hades before I threw out a legal name. I mean, I'd have to be insane to just give out a legal name, because that's where our liability would come from. It would be like saying McDonald's has broke a law and is going to be fined $10 million. Are you McDonald's? Nope. I'm not McDonald's. I am not McDonald's. I'm just the CEO. Or even better, I'm just the name holder for McDonald's. I just do business as McDonald's, which is what we're doing with the DBA stuff.
So if someone asks you for your name, we were talking a little bit about the First Amendment auditors on YouTube that always have their big moments when they're demanded to identify.
Yep.
And they argue over the authoritarians' right to ask for identification. You can't do that. I've got to, you Fourth Amendment, blah, blah, blah. When they say, do you have identification? You just flip that a little bit and say, oh, you want my name? And my kids call me Dad. You can call me, you can call me Benji. Or, not anything but the legal name that they're asking to look for on your state identification of the corporate name. Did Bill bail? Where are you, Bill?
Sorry, looks like I had some more technical difficulties. Can you hear me?
I can hear you now. Can you hear me?
I can. I just wanted to say it sounds like you're not speaking through a sock. That's an inside joke
you.
between Ben and I, actually. We had a little bit of YouTube kerfluffle there because Ben had some bad headphones. So, yeah, you're right. You just nailed it. I mean, the way we answer that question can vary, but what really matters, because I've had people who want to get on scripts. They're like, not medication scripts, although that's a pretty good correlation. People want to get scripts of how to, well, somebody says, what's your name? What should I say? I'm like, well, it depends on who's asking and why they're asking and where you're standing and what the jurisdiction is and what you're trying to accomplish. I mean, if you know who you are, that's not a very dangerous question. I mean, Jesus was asked that question by Pontius Pilate, are you a king? What is your title? That's what Pontius Pilate wanted. He wanted to know what the title was. He didn't want to know the name. That's funny because what's Jesus's last name? Of Nazareth? I don't know. I don't think he had a last name. So he had a family. Well, he had a region because back then they just did, I'm Jesus and I come from the region of Nazareth. But if we understand how all that works, it's like somebody asked me one day, they said something about Queen Elizabeth. And I said, well, what was Queen Elizabeth's last name? And she didn't have a last name. Elizabeth of the House of Windsor. So she called it a house, right? And so we have to understand how all that stuff works. And people say, well, we're not kings and we're not queens. Well, we aren't if we claim that we're in the public. If we claim that we're in the public, then we're definitely not royalty. If we, like Jesus said, I'm a king, but my kingdom isn't of this world. So wouldn't that throw a cord on its butt if you were to walk in and say that? It depends. I mean, what jurisdiction are we in and what are you wanting? If you're wanting me to lay ownership to a name, then I'll lay ownership to the name, John Edward. So your first name's John. No, I did not say that. That's what I'm commonly called as. I'm here to represent the public entity that you're trying to throw in jail. But it's going to be difficult for you to do that because that public entity only exists on paper. Does that kind of answer your question, Rob? I know we got kind of sidetracked there.
Oh, well, yeah, just kind of when you start talking about putting in brackets, I was seeing another thing where I looked down there when they put the They put the zip code in there, but they put it in brackets.
Yep. And I'm
Um,
And I saw another thing on that 1666 true, I don't know how to pronounce it yet. I haven't learned that yet. But if I'm correct in there, it said that anytime you use a capital letter in a name, it's considered corporate. Not capital letters, but a capital letter in a name.
You know, I've seen that, and I know that there's a whole big thing about this whole quantum grammar and parse syntax writing. I can't get into it. I'm sure there might be something to it, but I cannot bring myself to put a lowercase letter at the beginning of a sentence. I just can't. I don't think that it really matters. Yeah, or even a name. Like I can't bring myself to write a name. My ninth grade English teacher
Difficult to
would
do, isn't
wallop
it?
me upside the head if I tried to write a proper name with a lowercase letter. I just can't bring myself to do it. I don't think it has anything to do with capitalization. I think it has everything to do with our spirit and whether we know who we are or not. I
Yeah,
personally,
I'd
I think at this point, and I could be wrong. I could be completely wrong, and this may be presumptuous of me to say. I think I could walk into court with any name applied to me and do just fine. I don't think it matters. I think what matters is what we know, what we have up here and here. Like that's what I think matters. And so when you start trying to break it down, because there's folks who are going to just parse this thing to death. They're going to say, well, you should write your name this way, but not this way. You know, don't put uppercase letters here. Don't put lowercase letters here. I don't think it really matters. I think as long as we know who we are, we get back to that base of knowing who we are. I think that we can engage in business confidently without being afraid that our name is written one way or another, you know? So if I were to get pulled into court and I were to look down at a document and I were to see a first, middle, last name, but it was written in all lowercase, would it matter? It's still a first, middle, last name.
Yeah.
If it's written uppercase and lowercase, does it matter? Because I've seen it. I've seen my name written differently in the docket that was on the door, the charging document that was laid before me, and the subpoena. Like all of them were written differently, but they were still all referring. They were all the first, middle, last name that the public had control over. And I know now that I'm not any of those entities. I use those entities for business purposes, but I think I could handle myself much better now, understanding who I am. And so you're always going to have those people though that want to just split hairs and say, no. If you write your name like this, and they're going to, you're ruining your entire claim, and you're going to do this, and you're going to go to jail.
It just
those
helps
are-
reinforce who you are or who you know you are. Because
Right.
the all lower caps name, I don't have any proof of this right now, but in the past I've read some cases, appeals cases dealing with this whole name issue. The courts have had to deal with this. They call a lot of it
Yep.
meritless, frivolous, whatever. But in one of these readings I've read, they have said that the all lowercase is a sign of the sovereign in which the courts are not allowed to go there, which they were speaking to the lower courts and district courts, talking about that subject matter. They're not supposed to go there. That's all it said, which told me that, okay, there must be something to this all lowercase writing of your name. But it also, there's the Oshwander TVA Supreme Court case where they lay out the seven rules of their doctrine of avoidance, they call it, of constitutional issues. They mentioned something about we will know the sovereign by how they present themselves. So like you,
Bingo.
John, you know who you are, but if you also give that paperwork that also they know what that lowercase means, it kind of reinforces kind of who you are, who you're presenting yourself as. Because that's what they say, we'll know the sovereign by how they present themselves. And what they're talking about is how to avoid constitutional issues that the people will try to bring up. Anyway, TVA versus Oshwander. It's a good Supreme Court case. Maybe you should all read it. They got the rules kind of set up on how they will avoid constitutional issues. And this is what you got to get around. They call it the doctrine of avoidance.
So what did you say that was? TVA like
Oshwander,
Tango?
TVA. Oshwander, it's Oshwander versus Tennessee Valley Authority.
Aha, okay. I think I've seen that. I'm gonna look that up. Thank you for that lead. Ah, okay. I see it. I see it. Easy to find. I'm gonna go ahead and
It's just one of those things you read. It's kind of interesting. I mean, it's boring, but they give you nuggets. All these Supreme Court cases, when you read them, they always give you little nuggets of things. And
for folks who are listening to this later, if we can avoid getting our signals scrambled enough that we can get anything done. Oshwander versus Tennessee Valley Authority. It's spelled ASH, like ash from a fireplace. Ashwander, WANDER, like wander through the desert. Ashwander versus Tennessee Valley Authority. I'm going to check that out later. I agree that they'll know the sovereign by how they present themselves. So one of the things that I do when I'm speaking in public, in front of a group of men and women is, I try to show them how to react differently. And we all go through this. It's a very steep learning curve. I deal with folks every single day who have trouble with this. And I could very well have trouble with this tomorrow if I get caught off guard. We have to be careful and guard ourselves to not get caught off guard. So, you picture a king or queen walking down the sidewalk, and somebody steps out in front of the king or queen and they say, "Stop, halt, who are you and where are you going?" What would a king or queen respond? Would they say, "Well, I'm King Bill, or I'm King John, or I'm Queen Elizabeth, and I'm going to the post office. Would you please let me pass?" No, they would probably say, "Who are you, and by what authority do you come before me?" How we respond to these questions is how these officials know who we are. And trust me when I say that when they know that they're dealing with someone who knows who they are, the entire encounter changes. I watched a video just the other day of a gentleman who was recording on a dash cam. And he kind of inadvertently showed this. I wouldn't say that he knew who he was. He just pulled something out of his pocket that the officer that was stopping him wasn't ready for. And the encounter went like this. Cop pulled over, walked up to the window. He said, you're going in an awful big hurry, aren't you? He said, "Where are you going in such a big hurry? It seems to me like you're breaking some codes." And he said, "You've just lost your vehicle for 15 days. I'm going to impound your vehicle for 15 days. And the guy says, "Well," and they go backwards and forth a moment, but while they're going backwards and forth, the guy reaches up and he hits his dash cam, and he's taking this card out of his dash cam, this micro card or whatever that's recording in his dash cam. And the police officer says, "What are you doing? I think I asked you for your driver's license. I don't remember asking you to poke around up there. You should be getting your driver's license." And the guy says, "Well, I'm getting my SD card out of there," or whatever he says. I didn't pay close attention because it kind of ran through fast before I realized what I was watching. He said, "When this goes to court, I want this as evidence to show what happened and how you just threatened loss of my vehicle for 15 days. And the guy said, "Oh," he said, "Well, I didn't realize it." He said, I was just let you off with a warning." And the guy said, "What the hell are you talking about? Let me off with a warning. You just told me you were going to confiscate my vehicle for 15 days. "Yeah, no, I was going to let you off with a warning." Like everything changed when he saw that guy was recording. And I've seen the same thing happen to me, not just with the recording, but when I know who I am. Like when I present myself differently than the average debtor presents themselves, it changes the interaction in a way that you cannot possibly imagine. And the only way that comes is with experience and making mistakes. We've been at it for a minute. It's 9:37, East Coast time anyway. I appreciate everybody showing up.
Real quick,
Yes, ma'am.
RJ, RJ, are you still on the call?
Yes.
Earlier when you were offline, Bill, RJ had a question about the ANC.
Ooh, fire away.
Well, yeah, my question was, I'm from the ANCs. I've seen nobody's putting any kind of qualifiers on their signature in the signature line.
Okay.
Like non-surety, all rights reserved, without recourse, some kind of qualifier, as you're registering this state organization,
Right.
AKA BC
Right.
birth certificate.
So before you go further, are you talking about the Minnesota ANC or another state?
Minnesota.
Okay. Have you applied for your Minnesota ANC?
I did one back in 2018 and I let it expire because I really wasn't sure. Again, like you say, it was a tool, but I didn't know how to use it, and it expired.
Right.
Because I want to do a new one, but I want to, put some modifications to it. Basically,
I don't know of any signature spot for the ANC if you apply online. If you apply like in paper, then there may be, but I advocate doing everything online
no,
because
it's not a
online-
signature. It's when you put your name down. You got to on the very bottom. You put what you would call a signature, but it's electronic signature.
Oh, okay. So I do advocate that you do I don't just put a blank name. I don't put a legal name. What I do is I write the word by, and let's say I'm James Dosen is the first, middle, last name. So I'm John James of the Dosen family, and I'm putting this in the chat, but I'll explain what I'm putting for folks who are listening to this later, because I know the chat used on our meetings does not go online. So, or doesn't go up as part of the video. You can't see it. So I put the word by, B, uppercase B, lowercase y, colon, space, by, just by. BY has a very definitive legal meaning when you sign something by, okay? I, and then I put Dosen, D-O-S-O-N, that's the quote unquote last name, Dosen, colon, or comma, James, John James, John dash James. So I'm writing the name in a slightly different format. I'm using the private version of the name. I'm using the surname and then the given name, which is separated by a yes, just what Todd Philbrook just wrote in chat. By Dosen, or you could do it a different way. You could say John dash James Dosen, as long as you got something in there that sets that name apart. That hyphen sets it apart. Okay. John dash James Dosen, and he put beneficiary. Okay. What I put in mine, I put another colon and put the word holder in all capital letters, which I just put in the chat. By Dosen, by colon, Dosen, comma, John dash James, John hyphen James, colon, holder. And so I'm merely saying that I'm the holder, and I'm not putting without recourse. I'm not putting without prejudice. I'm not putting all rights reserved. I'm not putting UCC 1-308. I'm just writing by Dosen, comma, John dash James, holder. And I think any variation that you use that you're comfortable with, I'm getting more comfortable with using what I call the internationally protected person. And Courtney actually fetched a link for me just a moment ago. And it is, so now I would feel comfortable writing John J. Dosen, colon, holder for the John James Dosen first, middle, last name, right? So the private name by the public name, holder for the public name, by the private name, holder for the public name. So I think any variation thereof that you could adequately, plausibly explain or show, or like once a judge, a magistrate, anybody in a position of power sees that you are writing this stuff differently, I really think that it matters how you're writing it, as long as, because a lot of times I have filled out forms where I have put at the bottom, like if I write a letter or something like that, or a notice, a legal notice, I'll often put things like John dash James, and then quotation, or not quotation, in parentheses, I'll put given name. I'm writing this out in the chat while I'm doing it. So John dash James, given name, and then the word Dosen, surname, doing business as DBA, right? John James Dosen, which is in all caps. And I may do enough video editing to figure out how to put this stuff up on the video with the video and the audio later. We'll see. Todd says, I meant to put the colon. My keyboard is all ashy. I get it. I totally get it. I've had my share of technical difficulties tonight. So, yeah, I think it's splitting hairs to, I think what's right for one person is not going to be right for another person. And I think that's okay. One of the things that I'll end this one with is that the public, see if I can write this, the public is about form. The private is about substance. And the more I understand that, the more I understand the system that we're in. The public is about form. The private is about substance. Everything in the public has to be in the right form. You can't do anything in the public without putting things in the right form. So let's just look at what happens in a traffic ticket. And real quick, I am going to do screen sharing one last time. And I'm going to pull up something. Commonwealth of Kentucky uniform traffic citation. And look at this for just a moment. See if we can find one. Commonwealth of Kentucky uniform traffic citation. This is what you get when you're on the side of the road. Here's a copy right here. And look at this right here. Over here, we're going to make this bigger, hopefully. All right. And it's blurry. I know it doesn't matter. Everything is in a box. Every single thing on there is in a box. It's box after box after box. The only thing not in the box are the words at the top, Commonwealth of Kentucky Uniform Citation. Everything after that is in a box. All right. Legally, that document is blank because what is a box? A box is an enclosure. What is an enclosure? Let's look up the word enclosure real quick in Black's Law Dictionary. And the word enclosure says, I've not looked this up in years. I take a lot of risk when I do these things live. If I were doing these just as recordings, it would be much less risky. I'm often focused on things that I haven't thought of in years. Enclosure. Encumbrance. Enclosure. See, enclosure. I-N-C-L-O-S-U-R. Well, I'll be darned. It's not even under the letter E. It's under the letter I. E-F-G-H-I. So here I go off on another rabbit hunt. Enclosure. I-N-C. I-N-C-L. Enclosure. In Old English law, the act of freeing land from rights of common commutable rights, and generally all rights which obstruct cultivation and the productive employment of on the soil. Land surrounded by some visible obstruction, an artificial fence around one's estate. That is very, very entailing right there. In Old English law is what it starts out with. The act of freeing land from rights of common commutable rights, and generally all rights which obstruct cultivation and the productive employment of labor on the soil. All right. Enclosed lands, lands which are actually enclosed and surrounded with fences. Enclose, we're working backwards here. To surround, to encompass, to bound, to fence, or hem in on all sides. To shut up. To shut up. There you go. When you are enclosed, you are shut up. All right. So let's take all those definitions that we just had right there. And I'm going to take this off of screen sharing. And let's break that down just real quick. As soon as I can figure out how to take it off screen sharing here. Here we go. Enclosure. To enclose something is to set apart something from that which it is on. So if I have a 10-acre plot of land and I put an enclosure around 2 acres of it, and I give it to Joe, and Joe goes and gets a different public designation for that 2 hectares, different mailing address, right? Or he doesn't even have to do that. Let's just say he has a fence around it. And let's say I get served with a search warrant with the public, because this is public land, right? I've got a public title to it. Can they search Joe's 2 acres and the things that are inside Joe's fence? Probably not. Because those 2 acres have been set apart and separated from that which they are on, which is 10 acres. If you think about it, the public exists only on paper. Their lands are on paper. Everything about the public is on paper. If you were to destroy all the paper in the world, you would completely destroy the democracy. It would be gone. You wouldn't even have to take people away from jobs. Just destroy the paper. It's all on paper. Everything in the democracy is on paper. So what happens when they put a box around something? They set it apart. They shut it up. What happens when you go to court? The only 2 entities in court that are open to each other are the defendant and the plaintiff, the respondent and the petitioner, or because that's family law, respondent, petitioner, right? In civil law, it's in when you're suing someone, that is the defendant and the I just use the word, but in public law, it's the prosecutor and the defendant, right? Those are the only entities that are open to each other. The judge is in a box, the court recorder's in a box, the witness is in a box. Everybody that's in the court is in a box that's separated by the bar. The bar is a very, very important term. You're basically stepping onto the judge's ship, which is designated by a flag that sits behind the judge, who, by the way, is sitting in a box and is separated from the witness stand, who's sitting in a box. And then you got the jury, who's also sitting in a box. Everything's in boxes in the public. It's all about form. It has nothing to do with substance. Whereas in the private, everything is about substance and has nothing to do with form, which is why when somebody comes to me and says, how do I write up a first notice, a private first notice? Well, you put all the elements into it that is on a first notice. And people are like, well, you're just not telling me how to do it. I'm like, well, I'm telling you how to do it, but there's no form to it. Put all the elements on it that it needs to have to be a first notice. Like at the top of the document, write the words first notice. And then put all the things in there that accompany a first notice. And at the top, you may want to write, this is a private communication between the parties. This is a private document. And whatever you do, don't enter a private document into the public unless you want the public jurisdiction over the private. That's why when people sue each other and it goes to court and I'm suing for 10,000 and the judge says, well, we'll give you 2,000 and call it a day. Case done. Next case. Because once we give jurisdiction of our stuff to the public, then they have jurisdiction. So how do you go to court to keep your private stuff private? Well, there's a way to do that. It's called, you can put it in the docket, you can put it in the case, but you put it under cover for in-camera review only. In camera, IN space CAMERA, in camera. In camera means that the judge can only look at it off the bench. When he's on the bench, he's in public. When he's in his chambers, he's in private. It has nothing to do with the fact that in his chambers, he can take off his pants, which he may very well may. I don't know. I'm not in there. But it means that he's in a different jurisdiction. Sheriff, the county sheriff, stands with 1 foot in the public, 1 foot in the private. That's why if you're pulled over, at least in what we commonly call the United States, and you're being pulled over by a FBI agent, a city cop, a state trooper, and you think your rights are about to be violated, your best bet is to call in the county sheriff and tell them, I think my rights are about to be violated and I need you here to protect me because I am a private member of our nation and I think my rights are about to be violated. I'm an internationally protected person, business as a public person, but I'm not a public person and I need a deputy here because a deputy sheriff stands with 1 foot in private and 1 foot in the public. That makes them the most powerful law enforcement official on the land because they are truly on the land and makes them very powerful. That's a lot of info. Unless anybody has any questions, we might wrap this up because we've gone to 9:52. All right. Thank you, guys. I appreciate it. It's good to see good faces, new faces. It's good to see new faces. It's not new to see good faces. Well, I guess they're both account. And apologies for the technical difficulties. If you're listening to this after the fact on YouTube, then hopefully we remove that by doing a little editing. Otherwise, you all have a great night. I appreciate y'all, and I look forward to seeing you next week. And we'll try to get some videos out in the interim. Have a good day.
Have a good.